What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Free Speed Podcast, your go-to podcast for navigating fitness and life with purpose. We're your hosts, Cal.
And I'm Tash.
And today we have a special guest, Filip Kolodziej. He's from Poland, born and raised in Poland, moved to Ireland at 16 years old to finish up his last couple years of high school. He then went on to earn a bachelor's degree in physiology and then went on to study his master's in exercise physiology before moving to Australia to pursue a PhD in exercise science. He also helped coach me to a 255 marathon most recently and is a very serious triathlete and cyclist. And so welcome to the Free Speed Podcast, Filip.
Thank you for having me.
So if you guys have been following us for a while now, you'll know that Cal and I are both fitness coaches. We are certified personal trainers, group fitness trainers, and Cal has his CSCS strength and conditioning certification. So we know quite a bit about training, but we don't know the extent of the science behind the training. And that's why we wanted to get Phil on the podcast. He's one of the smartest people we've ever met. And basically the purpose of this episode is simple, guys. We want to help you guys train smarter. We're going to break down topics about the science behind training smarter. So we're going to talk about HRV, double threshold training, lactate testing, our VO2 max test that we did a couple weeks ago, and most importantly, just to give you guys some clear takeaways on how to apply this knowledge to your own training so you can optimize everything that you're doing. So, Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
A little bit of background of how we met Phil was, so when we moved here, Tash and I moved here, we had both signed up for the High Rocks Brisbane, which Phil did. Did you know that, Tash?
I didn't know that until now.
Yeah, so Phil,
I did doubles, yes.
Phil did the doubles High Rocks in Brisbane with his friend Torstein, who I didn't know Phil until after the High Rocks. And it's funny because when I met Phil, he goes, I'm never doing a High Rocks again. However, we bonded over the fact that I was starting to get into this triathlon races because I had signed up for 2 Olympic distance triathlons, and Phil was in need desperately for people to do research on. And so Phil has been doing these PhD studies. So could you just kind of go into briefly what you're doing with your PhD?
As I was finishing my master's, which was around 2022, Ed, who has already graduated at AUT, he started his research in this new sexy topic in endurance, which is durability, which is the ability to sustain your performance or your physiology as the exercise extends. So simply put, when, for example, you have to do a 5-minute time trial on the bike, you obviously will perform much better when you do it fresh compared to when you have to do it after, say, for example, 5 hours of cycling, as the World Tour cyclists do in Tour de France. They have to do that final 5-minute maximal effort on top of the climb. So that's the topic of durability, which I got fascinated with because of that person, Dan Plews, and his student Ed Mondier. So I got connected with Ed, and I really wanted to go to New Zealand to become his student and study this topic of durability, to find out what's determining why some people can sustain their physiology better than the others. And COVID, various reasons. I applied in Auckland 3 times for a scholarship, and I was offered to do the studies there, but I wasn't successful in getting the scholarship. So yep, I couldn't afford studying the PhD out of my own pocket. I got connected with Dr. Phil Bellinger. We put the application together with my idea here at Griffith, and I came here to Gold Coast. First, actually, I came on the same visa that you did, working holiday, kind of just chancing it. Screw it, whatever. I'm going to come here. If I get this scholarship, I'm going to get it. If not, it's just going to be a year of an adventure. But then around about half a year after I came to Australia, I got the scholarship and I started PhD. So that's a kind of an abstract story of how I got inspired in endurance exercise, science, the topic of durability, and why I am here in Gold Coast and why I'm doing the PhD that I'm doing. So I don't know. Do you want to?
Well, so you were interested in durability, and then what are you exactly studying right now?
Okay, that's another long story.
Just quickly explain like what your research and studies consist of.
Essentially, I wanted to investigate how important the muscle glycogen, which is the main energy source that we store in our muscles, how is that influencing that durability? There are a number of studies showing that how much glycogen you have in your muscle is key for maintaining a particular exercise intensity, say power output on the bike or speed when you run on a treadmill, but also it's very important for the cellular function itself of the muscle. So I wanted to really study that relationship. Okay, muscle glycogen and what is happening to the people's durability when they do certain, endurance tasks. And I really wanted to come up like with an intervention to influence the way in which body is consuming the muscle glycogen. And I'm going to use some science words. Hopefully they make sense. Intrinsically or endogenously, our body is producing a hormone called adrenaline, if you're in America, or if you're in Europe, epinephrine, that's turning on the metabolism inside the muscles to burn more carbohydrates, more muscle glycogen in the consequence. So I was wondering, how could I influence that normal physiological response, hormonal response, and study what's happening to, people's performance during those endurance tasks. And then I realized that I could use actually a pharmacological intervention using an asthma inhaler. And the reason being, the asthma inhalers, also known as beta agonists, they're used for opening your lungs for asthmatic people by turning on the same sort of, we call it in biology, receptor that epinephrine or adrenaline is turning on in different organs. So the drug is used for asthma, but after you inhale it through your lungs, it gets to your circulation, to your blood, and then all the other organs, including muscle. And that's where it would influence that muscle glycogen metabolism. So in my studies, the study that Cal participated in, I created a quite nasty knee extension protocol, endurance protocol, which people completed to, essentially to exhaustion. So some people did close to 500, some people did close to 800 knee extensions of increasing intensity. And they performed that test after either this asthma inhaler or after a placebo inhaler. So that's the study that you participated in. So very mechanistic study. So I'm just studying the endurance of a single muscle, just the quadricep itself, after placebo versus that beta agonist that hopefully would influence the way the muscle is using the glycogen and the way it's contracting, etc., etc.
And before we kind of jump into our questions that we have about just some other stuff, what does your day-to-day kind of look like, and are you training for anything specific right now? I know you're super busy, but just tell everyone kind of like what you're training for, what the day in your life looks like.
So it's been changing since I started PhD. I've been training for different things. As Carl mentioned, I train for high rocks for a little bit.
Why are you laughing?
Because I'm the last person that should be training for high rocks. It's a long story, but yeah, we can make
I think I could get you good at high rocks, Phil. I haven't given up on you yet.
You haven't given up on me. Okay.
When you're ready for that next high rocks race, I'll make sure that you're ready.
What's the high rocks in Canada?
Yeah, we'll have to do like a Vancouver.
Ottawa or do they have one in Vancouver?
They just had one. It's right next to Christmas, so maybe Christmas 2027 we'll get together
for high rocks. Okay, we'll think about it. But anyway, I've been training for different things. When I first came to Australia, actually, it's another reason why I came to Australia. I did a half Ironman back in Ireland in August 2023, I believe. And I qualified for the World Champs, the Ironman 70.3 World Champs, which were supposed to happen in New Zealand in Taupo. And I was just all kind of putting it all together. Yeah, I'm going to come to Australia, do PhD, and I'm going to do, the World Championships in New Zealand. But then when you land down in Australia, the reality hits you. And I just figured that, oops, actually, I don't have enough money to go to New Zealand and do a half Ironman there. So I decided to train for another event, like a long distance event here in Queensland, in Townsville, which was multi-sport world championship. And I wanted to do a triathlon union, long distance. So it's close to Ironman, but not quite Ironman. It's like a 3K swim, 120K bike, and 30K run, I believe. And I trained like crazy for that. That was the first few months of my PhD. And then I ignored a lot of signals. I ignored a lot of signs that I know, HRV, as you mentioned. And yeah, I got injured and I kind of lost the passion for a while. And there was a period when I wasn't training for anything specifically. But then what happened was during that study that you participated in, and I'm very grateful for all the people that I met through that study, I started meeting just a bunch of triathletes. Shout out to
Jack Saunders.
Jack Saunders and what GC Social Tri, and I can never remember what's the order, Social Tri or GC Social Tri, GC Social Tri group. So the people from that triathlon group started coming into the lab, and we started talking about the triathlon, and it just lit the fire back in me again. And I just was like, okay, I have to train for triathlon again. Because I was just doing kind of everything: gym, bit of swimming, bit of running, bit of high rocks, whatever.
What was the training hours per week before you kind of recommitted to what you're doing now?
I don't know. I wasn't really tracking it. I was just doing it. Like when you look at my Training Peaks, it's just like, the way in Training Peaks, which is the coaching platform for anybody that's not aware. It's a coaching platform in which you can upload your workouts from Garmin or whatever watch you're using. And your coach can see those workouts, but also conversely, your coach can like build the sessions, throw it into the Training Peaks, and then you can upload it to your Garmin watch, and like you can execute that session that your coach wants you to do. So it's quite a good tool. But if you were to look at my Training Peaks up until the point I had just this fire lit back again moment. All my sessions were just like blank, as in like there was like no prescribed session, just like random stuff. But as you execute the session that was prescribed and you like match the distance or the time or whatever, the session is green. You know what I'm talking about. Some people might be aware of that. And literally the moment I started training for triathlon, everything in my Training Peaks just went green, because I started like monitoring my training, like prescribing sessions for myself, like having some sort of a plan. So that was about I don't know, like 3 months ago, when I decided, okay, there is like no general kind of like plan, but I just want to get back to triathlon. I just love it. This is me. Like I found myself again, literally. And it's another topic that we can talk about the purpose and the sort of the importance of believing in the training that you do. but the responses that I started seeing in my training and the recovery from training, in terms of the heart rate variability, it was insane. And it was not the first time in my life when I saw that, when I had that purpose again, and the training that I started doing, maybe it was the right training physiologically, maybe not, but it was working. So yeah, I just started training back for triathlon. So in terms of volume, to get back to your question, Tash, I generally bike 4 times a week. I run 3 times a week. I swim 4 to 5 times a week. The swimming pool is literally 5 minutes away from my office, so it would be a sin not to jump into the pool at the lunch break. And then, yeah, I do resistance session. I do silly stuff in the gym, plyometrics, and put it on Instagram to make a fool of myself, but also try to teach people how to train a little bit, I guess. So overall, I train anywhere between 15 to 21, 22 hours a week, including all of these modalities. And yeah, as I said in the intro, which I'm not sure if we saved that intro or not, the day starts with training. It's a non-negotiable. It's in line with the physiology. I'm a great fan of Andrew Huberman, who's the circadian rhythm evangelist, and he highlights the importance of training early with your biological rhythm, in particular with that rhythm of the cortisol hormone. It's key that we exercise in line with that kind of a 24-hour rhythm of the cortisol. So it's biological reasons, but also it just, through the years of studying at university, I found out that I can do a lot of like cognitive work when I just start a day with training. It's non-negotiable. So always starting with some sort of training, then I head to the university, 7:30, 8 a.m., depending what type of training I did.
So what time do you wake up?
I wake up most of the days. Actually, it's a funny story because I think we had this conversation with Cal in the lab about waking up, and I think he told me that he used to wake up at 4:08, or was it like 4:32?
4:08.
4:08. Very strange time. And since that moment, I started setting my alarm to 4:18 instead of because my alarm used to be 4:20 because essentially I need to get to the tram from the Broad Beach station at 5 a.m. So I just need to wake up around 4:20 to just get everything ready and just leave home. But then I set my alarm to 4:18 just to see if it's anything special. And I kid you not, some days I would actually wake up, even when there was no alarm, I would wake up 4:18. So it's crazy how you can really entrain your body if you repeat it over and over and over again. You suddenly you don't need an alarm. That's what happened this morning. Mm-hmm. I woke up 4. I would have to look at my whoop. I can't remember. I woke up around 4 a.m. without any alarm. Mm-hmm. So I wake up around 4 a.m. and then most of the times I start my training around 5 a.m., 5:30. So yeah.
Okay. And then you do your PhD how many days a week?
It's actually a great kind of wisdom that a friend of mine that's finishing his PhD now, shout out to Alec, he shared with me. I don't wanna ruin it, but yeah, I'm gonna try to say this the same way he said it. He said academia is a great job. You can decide whenever you want to work during the week, and it can be any of the 7 days of the week or something like that. Essentially saying that in academia, you have a lot of freedom. For example, me, you can do a lot of training. You can really squeeze it in. You can do training in the middle of the day. It's crazy. People that work at the office, they're not able to squeeze in an hour session in the middle of the day because they just have a 30-minute lunch break. But with academia, I can really chunk my workload, and I'm able to train twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. But that workload is very sporadic. So essentially, I try to work every day, recently I've been starting another study which has been very stressful because I'm actually the participant. So I've been taking some weekends like completely off. Isn't like still doing like light work, like communicating with potential participants, or like doing the site coaching like I did for Cal. But yeah, I definitely slowed down. But at the beginning of the PhD, I was just working on the PhD every single day. Some days I was working 10 hours a day. Some days I was working like 6 hours a day on the PhD. So it's very flexible in that sense. So a lot of PhD students whinge about the experience of doing PhD. But at the same time, it's an incredible lifestyle. And we often joke about it. I don't go on coffee break three times a day. But yeah, there are some people that, they just like, okay, let's catch coffee. It's break time. That's the academia, essentially. There are periods when it's very slow and you have 3 lunch breaks a day, or there are periods when you're really cramming. For example, you're rushing to submit a grant application, or you have a submission deadline, as I will have in February of 2027 for my PhD submission. So yeah, it's a very flexible lifestyle, and I'm trying to kind of make it work with exercise, and also giving some time to my friends on the weekend when possible. So I wouldn't be able to give you like a very rigid day, because they're all crazy days. Mm-hmm. Some days I'm in the lab, some days I'm just in front of the computer writing code, some days I'm doing very mundane admin work, such as like ethics applications, or like writing risk assessments for the lab. It's everything. Mm-hmm. That's why it's very stressful, don't get me wrong, but I love this lifestyle.
You love what you do.
It's so varied.
That's what's important.
Extremely varied lifestyle.
Let's get into making sense of all of the data. So, you mentioned HRV earlier. It's something that a lot of people kind of track. Oh, yeah, it's on your Garmin. It's on your sleep. Like, oh, it's high, it's low. What was yours yesterday, Cal? Mine was
98.
He's been ignoring
98.
Mine was 72.
He's been ignoring his HRV for a
while.
Phil, like, what does it actually mean? And to anyone listening who is, marathon training, strength training, whatever it is, and they have this number, what does it mean? What can you use it for? And how can you kind of use that number to your advantage and like try to make sense of that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no problem. So I first got interested in heart rate variability actually through the work of this researcher from Auckland, Dr. Dan Plus. That's the topic that he did his PhD in. And heart rate variability has been long known as a measure, indirect measure, I should say, of the so-called autonomic balance. So what I mean by autonomic. So our nervous system is divided into 2 sort of branches. So one is systemic, SNS, nervous system, that we use for all the functions that we have the control over. So controlling our muscles, speech, things like that. But there are also a lot of things that are happening in our body that are not under our conscious control. Now, that's a debatable topic. You can influence the autonomic nervous system, but that's for another podcast. But anyway, the autonomic nervous system, ANS, is the one that's controlling all these things, such as like, your heartbeat. You can't control your heartbeat. Well, you can with breathing, but yeah, another topic. Your heartbeat, your gut function, emptying your bladder, things like that. That's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And now, why is the heart rate variability an indirect measure of that, and why is that relevant? The autonomic nervous system itself is subdivided into 2 parts. One is called parasympathetic. popularly known as the rest and digest. And the other one is called sympathetic, which is also known as the fight or flight part of the autonomic nervous system. And these two parts of the autonomic nervous system kind of work like in a seesaw sort of mechanism to control all these bodily functions that we don't have the conscious control over. So what we know from the cardiovascular physiology is that when the sympathetic nervous system activity is increasing, the fight or flight response is activated. For example, during exercise, what is happening to your heart rate?
Increasing.
It's increasing. It's accelerating. Okay. But what is also happening to your heartbeat as that sympathetic nervous system activity is increasing, but also the parasympathetic nervous system activity is decreasing at the same time, the heartbeat becomes more regular. So it's not just faster, but it's also more rhythmical. Okay, so think about it. For example, your heartbeat can be 60 beats per minute, but if you were to slice that minute into like smaller chunks, it's actually never, it would depend on the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, but effectively, there are periods when your heart rate is like 65, 58, 62, 52. It's kind of swinging. And then overall, it's 60 beats per minute. And the heart rate variability is the measure of how frequently that heartbeat is swinging. So, you have that heart rate per minute, but it's actually that what we call the beat to beat interval. It's varying from beat to beat. And what we know is that when your sympathetic nervous system activity is increased, that variability is decreasing. The heartbeat is more like pum, 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 pum. When the parasympathetic activity is predominant, the heart rate gets more variable. Exactly. It's more like pum, 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 pum. Just more random.
That would be a higher...
That would be higher variability, and that's the indication that your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, is more active. And the reason we are tracking HRV in particular during sleep is because we want our parasympathetic nervous system to be nicely turned on at a high level during sleep when we are supposed to rest. And that's one of the kind of key functions of the parasympathetic nervous system.
That seems counterintuitive though. So while you're sleeping, you want your heart rate to be less variable.
No, you want it to be like
more. You want it to be more like.
You want, like, your heart rate has to slow down during the sleep. Your metabolic functions, everything is slowing down. So your heart rate, which is directly related to the level of the metabolism, is also slowing down. And to slow down the heart rate, you need to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system. And as you turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, you make the heart rate more variable. But here's the kicker. Every night is essentially different. There's a different level to which your parasympathetic nervous system is turned on. So, for example, if you did something very stressful just before going to sleep, such as, for example, high intensity interval training, and that activated your sympathetic nervous system, you might be heading into the sleep with that elevated activity of the sympathetic nervous system, which would then be reflected in lower HRV and potentially increased resting heart rate during your sleep. So that's
but then the variability would be more bump,
would be less
bump,
variable.
bump,
Exactly.
bump.
Yeah, indicating that your sympathetic nervous system is more active.
I find that so interesting because it seems like, and obviously this is not how it is, but like in your head, when you think of consistency, you think of like a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's the opposite. And I think I've never
So you want your heart rate to be more variable.
Yeah. And I've never heard this
higher
explained
number
so well.
of
I mean, you
HRV
want it to be
is better.
From the perspective of measuring like how rested you are, how you're responding to training. So essentially, when you're tracking your HRV, what we see, and I should go back to the research that got fascinated me in HRV. What they've seen is that athletes who have higher HRV over longer periods of time, so it's not just one night's HRV, it's over the weeks. These athletes tended to perform better to their counterparts at the same athletic level, but with the lower HRV over the weeks leading to the competition. So what they figured is that the heart rate variability over longitudinal period, over weeks, is reflecting essentially how your body is managing the training that you're doing. Because there are periods in training when your HRV will drop.
It should drop.
Yeah, if you're doing, well, that's questionable. Could you do high intensity interval training and have a bump up in HRV the night after that training? And I got that in my training too. It's so context specific. It depends on so many things. How you fueled,
right?
How early you trained,
how much sleep you got. All these. I think one of the things we talked about is your HRV can be significantly affected by life stress more than training stress.
Could be. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And again, as I said earlier, I believe your HRV and the way you respond to training can be literally influenced by your mindset and the belief you have in the training that you do. There are a lot of proponents of the idea that all the physiological effects from exercise is just a placebo. It's just a belief effect that if you have people exercise and people are educated enough, exercise is good for movement is good and all that, that's making your system responding the way it's responding, and it's making you healthier or fitter in a consequence. So yeah, HRV is it's a very nuanced measure, but the way it should be interpreted is essentially you should track it over an extended time to see how you're responding to the training that you're doing. A single night, change in the HRV is not kind of a be or an end all when it comes to whether I'm doing right training or not, whether my body is actually adapting to what I'm doing. But also, I should mention one important thing. You could have HRV has to be relative to you. So when we're talking about HRV, there are many different indices actually to describe HRV. The most popular one that we often see in the apps is the RRSD, is the standard deviation of the RR interval. So essentially how variable is the distance between those big peaks when you look at the ECG trace. There are different measures. But essentially, my RR MSD, that measure of the heart rate variability, is very high. So when I respond to the training well, is around 130 milliseconds. That measure of variability between each beat, about 130 milliseconds. But then you have athletes who could be 50 milliseconds. And hold on, does that mean that I'm a better athlete than they are? No. You could be a world champion and your HRV could be 50 or 60. I definitely am not a world champion, yet my HRV is extremely high, probably just because of my physiology, my autonomic nervous system, the way it's built. So you have to interpret it in you as n equals 1.
Yeah, so you look at HRV over a period of months and how you're trending, and based on your own numbers, if it's lower, it means you're likely more strained or stressed, or
if it's decreasing, that's the key kind of thing to look out for, the trend. So and not even months, weeks. You can make quick adjustments based on that's why I started asking my athletes that I work with because I don't have access to their Whoop, or their Garmin does the HRV now as well. I asked them just to send me a screenshot of their weekly HRV, the whole week, so I can see whether what we're doing during the week, whether we are kind of like at the baseline, so like the body is coping. If I see negative trend across the week, then I'm like, okay, we need to slow down, and we need to readjust next week, because we want to bump it back again. We want that positive trend again. So one is trend. If we're trending down over a week, that's why Whoop and Garmin, I guess that's why they give you 1 month and 7 day kind of picture, is so you can detect those trends. So we're looking at the trend. If it's negative, we need to make an adjustment, whether it's what we're doing around training or the training itself. But also we are looking at the consistency in that HRV. So as we talked there a couple of minutes ago, if I see my HRV going, say for example, from 130 down to 90, and then back to 130, and then like 100, and then 120, that means that my body is struggling to adapt what I'm doing on daily basis. And if we the key we discussed this in the car, the key kind of outcome that we want in training, the most powerful tool we have in training, is consistency. Don't get injured, don't get burned out, whatever, don't get sick. Apply sufficient amount of load such that the stress that you created on your body create small enough strain so your body can bounce back and become even better than it was before. So if we have those swings in the HRV, that's indicating that the stress that we put on our body created a big strain, and our body needed extra time to come back to the baseline. So yeah, two things: trends and how kind of steady it is. We want that HRV day to day to be kind of steady. We don't want big swings.
That's interesting, because I'm looking at my Garmin HRV status right now over the past 4 weeks, and it looks like during the marathon, it dipped quite a bit.
That's to be expected. Very high acute load.
Exactly. But then, obviously, afterwards, once I was starting to recover, started to go up. Oh, I'm in the green again. And then, honestly, for the last week, it's been declining.
That's why.
Down.
You reduced training load. You were training quite a lot before the marathon, and that training was sustainable, was consistent, and your body was adapting to endurance training. So the HRV was elevated. That's the key adaptation to the endurance training. Your HRV becomes elevated, and then if the training that you're doing gives enough time for your body to recover, it's going to stay there. Mm-hmm. But then if you detrain, it's going to start coming down. So that's what happened. Your body rebounded from the stress of the marathon, and then because you reduced your training volume, you stopped doing as much endurance exercise, it started slowly coming back
and
down.
I'm feeling it too, because I did a 5K just before this, and it felt like extremely hard.
Yeah.
So I just need to start running a bit more. That's kind of, I think, what I need to do, and just stay more consistent with running. But obviously, like, I needed to take a little bit of a break after the marathon. Like, that was a lot of load. But as a woman, my HRV is consistently in the 70s. And obviously I see men like with their HRV in the hundreds. You're saying yours is 130.
Yep.
Is it necessarily like bad to be like below 100, or does it just depend on like so many factors, and it's just, obviously you said it's specific to you, but is there anything that would be able to like help me increase my HRV?
So again, you should not compare your HRV to other people, whether you're of the same sex or whether you're different sex. There is like no data that I am aware of that would suggest that females tend to have lower HRV.
Okay.
So you always shouldn't interpret the trends of the HRV relative to to yourself as n equals 1. There is some emerging research suggesting that your HRV, the trend of your HRV, can be fluctuating in line with your menstrual cycle.
I thought so.
However, that's actually bringing back the demons because when I was working back for that sports science company, we got involved in a project where we were tracking the HRV and training load and the reproductive hormones measured by using the urine sticks. And I just, I helped with data collection for that study as an intern. But then after that study completed, and it's incredibly interesting what this data might reveal, I had to start my PhD. So maybe one day I'll get back to it.
So you ran away from the data that could change lives, Phil.
It could
change lives.
There are so many things, but yeah, like you've met Leon, my secondary supervisor, great physiologist. In his office, he's got this, like, on the whiteboard, he's got like just like those like bullet points for like the articles and like things he was meant to like publish, or experiments he was supposed to like dig back up like some data and like write manuscripts on it. It's just never ending in academia or like research. I believe you're just opening so many like boxes, and it's just like, your interests are just so often so like diverse that maybe one day I will get back to it. Or maybe they will find a student that will carry on with that data that was collected. But to come back to our topic, your HRV could be influenced by the menstrual cycle, and it seems that during your high hormone phase, so when you have that increase in progesterone, that's when the HRV tends to decrease in the studies that I've read anyway. And conversely, it seems that HRV is increasing when your progesterone levels are low, but you have that peak in estrogen just before ovulation.
Follicular phase,
So that's to be elucidated. What we like to say in the manuscripts.
All right.
The mechanisms are to be elucidated.
I wanted to ask you just about your coaching philosophy and your opinion on how you approach different athlete to athlete, and if you have just like a very different approach depending on the person you're working with, in terms of, we've talked about how some people are much more fast twitch driven versus slow twitch driven. Muscle fiber types. I just saw something today that was really interesting about kind of just how much volume different athletes, depending on their muscle fiber types, can change like what they're prone to. And then obviously we've seen everyone talking about double threshold. I know you probably will move to Norway at one point to just
I need to visit Thorsten anyway.
to absorb the double threshold. But yeah, like, what can you just talk about
coaching philosophy
and like touch on double threshold and different
training methodologies, training methodologies, approaches. Yeah, no problem at all. So funnily enough, my supervisor, Dr. Phil Bellinger, his work is centered around muscle fiber typology and how it's influencing the responses to training and performance. And what some of his research has shown in collaboration with group in Ghent, Belgium, is that people that are more, as you said, fast twitch tend to respond better to reduced training load, or conversely, they cannot handle an increased training load to the same level that the slow twitch dominant athletes can. However, we should explain what the fast and slow twitch means. to give a little bit more insight. So essentially, put simply, our muscles can be categorized into two types. And in science, we call them type 1 and type 2. No surprises. Type 1 is what scientists call slow twitch muscle fiber. And what it basically means is that this genetic variant of the muscle of the part of the muscle that's responsible for contracting the muscle, guess what? It's twitching slowly. It's simple as. So that muscle is contracting slowly relative to a fast twitch muscle. And what we see is that the characteristics of the speed of that twitch or that contraction, they correspond to many different physiological characteristics or many different functions of these two muscle types. So type 1, slow twitch, are also known as the non-fatigable fibers. So these are the fibers, because they contract slowly, that allows them to a lot of contractions, a lot of work at a quite high metabolic output before becoming fatigued, before the tension that they develop is dropping off, before essentially, like when you think in terms of like overall, before the speed of running or the power on the bike is decreasing. Conversely, the fast twitch muscle fibers, they contract fast, which allows those fast contractions to create a lot of tension, a lot of power quickly. Power athletes, sprinters, but then they cannot sustain it for a long time. They fatigue quite quickly. And what research suggests is that the fast guys, they cannot, like the way their muscles are doing the work, it essentially putting more burden on their body, because they're tapping into that fatigue, closer to that fatigue, or more often into those like fatigue levels, those signals that then are resulting in that systemic stress. While the type 1, the slow twitch guys, they're not tapping into those like critical levels of fatigue as often, and it's not as costly for the body to do muscular work when you have more type 1 fibers. So this is a key adaptation that we see actually with endurance training. As you do more and more endurance training, if you have a degree of type 2, those fast fibers, they slowly become converted into type 1. You develop that endurance because your body is like, well, this guy is doing a lot of like prolonged work. So we actually need to shift kind of our what we call phenotype. So the way the genes are expressed into what's more suitable to what this body is doing. So if you're a fast athlete, that doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot become a good endurance athlete, because there's that degree of conversion to slow twitch, building that endurance. But then the other way around is much harder. If you're like me and you're born type 1, like back in school, I was never able to jump high. I was never able to sprint. I was always mad that I would train the hardest in the pool. I would lead the sessions, but then when it would come to 100-meter freestyle, my mates would be swimming 56 seconds and I was swimming 60 seconds. And I could understand that. I'm working the hardest. I'm working the most. I am like doing those killer sessions. And guess what? I was doing those killer sessions because I'm type 1. I was able to handle the load. But then when it came to a 100-meter event, they were just kicking my ass. So that's how this muscle fiber typology is influencing the how you can handle the training load. So obviously the gold standard method of determining what's your muscle fiber typology is to put a needle in your leg, not yourself, but by a physician, take a muscle biopsy and determine how much of type 1 versus type 2 is expressed in your muscles, like at a genetic level. my supervisor, Phil Bellinger, he's been developing a technique over the years together with that group in Belgium, where you can actually estimate the muscle fiber typology based on the levels of the key metabolite called carnosine that is very rich in the type 2 fibers. So essentially you can do an MRI scan to measure how much the carnosine there is in that muscle that you scan, and you can therefore estimate whether you're more type 2 or type 1. And I had this scan done here in Mermaid Beach Radiology with my supervisor as a part of one of his studies, and turned out that my carnosine levels are close to nothing. I have close to nothing in terms of type 2 fibers, which then is probably in line with the way I train, but also with the way I respond to training. I've learned over the years of training myself that I just respond well to doing a lot of endurance work. My body loves it. My HRV loves it when I do a lot of consistent endurance work.
But so does this mean, Phil, that if someone gets an MRI, they can send you the photo and you can tell them if they are more type 1 and type 2?
It's a special type of MRI with contrast for carnosine.
Yep.
So it's not a typical MRI that you can go and just get. You have to get involved in research with Griffith University. But getting back to my training philosophy then.
Wait, I have one quick question. So from knowing that information, what does that do? It just helps you train more efficiently for your own body type?
Yeah, because remember, the number one priority in training is consistency.
Right.
So you need to train consistently. You need to train to your type. So if you're a power athlete, if you're more fast twitch, if you're more type 2 dominant, then you cannot train too much because you're going to overtrain quite quickly.
Right.
You need more quality. That's what's going to give you that performance advantage, but less overall volume.
Gotcha.
Whilst when you're more
Phil,
type 1...
this is getting really interesting though, because obviously there's
it depends on the sports as well.
So we have Ironman triathlon, we have a 100-meter sprint, right? Those are the very polar opposites in terms of training. And then obviously there's a lot of sports that fall somewhere in between.
Yep.
And like what I just came from, which was 2,000-meter row, which is a 6-minute test.
It's in between. It's a mixture.
What you're saying is you could have a team of 40 athletes training for somewhere in between this 100-meter and this Ironman distance, and the training protocol that they should be following is likely different depending on if you knew their muscle fiber typology. You would want, say if it's split right down the middle, you would want 20 people following a more slow twitch program that was higher volume and going to benefit their system into getting the maximal adaptation. You would want the other 20 athletes maybe doing a little lower volume, more strength work to benefit their maximal. And you're coming at it from two different ways with two different. And I think no team does approach it that way. Every athlete follows the same program. The coach programs a week and everyone follows the same program. But based on what you're saying,
it's changing. It's changing. It's definitely becoming more appreciated in team sports and individual sports. When you look at the swimmers, and it's logical. Very often, like you have the sprinter group, you have the middle distance guys, 200, 400, and you have the 800, 1500 meter guys. Or same in the team sports. When they're doing, for example, like like shuttle runs. You would make, for example, like you're categorizing your athletes. That's another topic for another podcast. You can categorize your athletes based on their anaerobic speed reserve, which is no direct link, but potentially linked to that fiber typology. So those people with the higher anaerobic speed reserve, you would make them make a little bit smaller volume, less shuttles compared to like your, for example, like your I don't know, like your
But
your wingers that are like slow
Yeah.
twitch and they're workhorse, and yeah, you would make them run more shuttles. So yeah, it is appreciated in the team sports. But also to get back to what you were saying is it's a little bit more nuanced than just pure volume, because remember, depending on what type of sport you do, that's the second key priority in training. Apart from consistency, the second key priority is the set principle, specific adaptations on imposed demands. So whatever event you're doing, you need to train specifically to that event. So if you're doing a marathon but you're more type 2, that doesn't mean that you should be spending more time in the weight room because you're type 2. No, you still need to train the way you would train for the marathon.
Right.
And the type of training stimuli that you employ, or I would employ in my training, changes depending on what I coach my athletes for. So for endurance athletes in general sense, so triathlon, road running, it's quite simple. We want to develop our aerobic capacity, also known as VO2 max, because that's what's allowing our body to essentially do more work. Our cells, our muscles, use oxygen to burn down carbohydrates and fats to generate energy, and that energy is harnessed for the muscle contractions. If your VO2 max is higher, you can do more aerobic work. Guess what type of work you're doing when you're running a marathon or when you're doing sprint triathlon? It's all aerobic. You need to use oxygen for that duration. So we want to elevate VO2 max. To elevate VO2 max, we know we need to push our body close to that level of oxygen consumption. So we need to do high intensity interval training. But here's the kicker. We cannot do high intensity interval training every single day, because then what we lose? We lose the consistency in training. So that's where the kind of a popular method that was popularized by another great scientist, Dr. Steven Seiler. And yeah, it's supposed to originate from Norway, the polarized training. So your training, if you're an endurance athlete, now we're talking about endurance, should be a mix of that low intensity volume training that makes up the volume of your training, with a little bit of spice, high intensity interval training to drive that VO2 max up. But then guess what? Set principles, specific adaptations on imposed demands. So if I have a triathlete that is doing an hour race, I know that he will be very close to his maximal we discussed it, metabolic steady state, another physiological measure that we're going to leave for another day. But to develop ability to essentially move faster at this sort of level of physiology, guess what? I need to train him a little bit at that level of physiology. And that's where your threshold training comes in. But I hope you can kind of understand how all of these different types of stimuli, how they need to be brought together and how they need to be kind of varied depending on where we are in our like training kind of year, in our like macro cycle, as we call it, but also within those like micro cycles, smaller periods of training, depending on when our competition is and what type of competition we're training for. Because, for example, these days you have triathletes that are doing like sprint distance, like they're racing in the World Triathlon Union races, but then they're also racing an Ironman. So their training has to change. They're like the same athlete, same physiology, but they're training for something else and they have to slightly adjust their stimuli. So it's
we see Blumenfeld. Blumenfeld went from Ironmans to Olympic and back to Ironman.
Yeah, like his comeback to his Union Triathlon wasn't as successful, because I think in the Olympics he came 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
After his kind of Ironman adventure, but you can see how like going like long, how he was able to kind of make that move probably with the right training that they did, but also like leveraging his physiology. Apparently his VO2 max is like
90.
close to 100. Like there was that YouTube video where they, like his coach Olaf Alexander Boo, they were like doing a VO2 max test on this Norwegian triathlete. And he's cranking up like, you know, like big watts on the bike, and this coach is saying this data cannot be published, this has never been seen before. So like, yeah, obviously crazy physiology, but probably they're also doing some right training, and they're adjusting the training depending on what they're training for. So in a general sense, my training philosophy, consistency, and specific adaptations on imposed demands. Whatever I'm coaching the athlete for, I need to tailor my training to first enhance their physiology overall as an athlete. So we're going to probably skip that, but yeah, strength training as well. That includes strength training and plyometrics, power. But here's when the art to coaching comes in. I need to get a feel for what my athlete is like. We had this discussion a little bit about their mental and their physiology, how they're responding to training. So that's why I ask my athletes, send me your HRV so I can see how you responded to the type of training that we did. So I cannot take your muscle biopsy, or I cannot do an MRI scan on your leg, but I can kind of develop a feel. Okay, this guy, I gave him, it's just completely made up example. I gave him, for example, 20 hours of training, and that hammered him. I know, okay, like he's just not this type of athlete.
We're not there yet.
Oh, maybe we're not there yet, but also maybe that's his physiology. Or like, for example, that's when like different types of like interval training come in. Like me, like like it's funny, yeah, I'm just such an extreme, like so it's always funny to interpret my own training. In my best days, I can do like, so one of the popular high intensity interval training formats in cycling is 30-30s. So essentially you're going kind of 9 out of 10 for 30 seconds, and then for 30 seconds you're kind of like cruising, just soft pedaling. And when you're going like that hard part, that has to be above the power that you get at your VO2 max test, because you obviously want to drive your oxygen consumption close to your VO2 max levels very quickly, because it's just a 30-second interval. So when I do those 30-30s, when I'm doing them consistently, I know when I'm in training these days, I'm doing PhD. So
how many rounds of that would you do?
When I was in my absolute peak training for the half Ironman in Ireland 2 years ago, I would do 30-30-30s.
And that's an hour.
No, that's
or 30 minutes. Yeah.
30 minutes of work. But yeah, it's an hour session. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. No, it's 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Yeah.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
You guys can't do simple math.
No, come back. That's what I do right now. 30-30-30s. That's what I can do now. I used to do 30-60-40s.
Oh.
Jesus.
So I would do close to an hour session with 30 minutes of VO2 max work. But guess what? I would handle it. Mm-hmm. And my body loved it. But when I give 30-30s to my athlete Jan, who I kind of feel is more, it's based on my feel now, I feel he's more kind of a hybrid. He's kind of in between. Like he can handle 12 or 14 of 30-30s. And like I've done his VO2 max testing. We know what his power output is at VO2 max. We've done the 5-minute time trial, which is also a close approximation of the VO2 max power output. And like I'm actually stupefied by it. Like why can I do like 40-30-30s, and why can Jan do only 14 and he's cooked?
But that's maybe a good sign though, that you might be really good with a little bit of rest, which means a High Rocks doubles event. You might need to get back into High Rocks doubles. Yeah. Yeah, I think
so coaching is science and art, to kind of like summarize it.
Do you have an opinion on, just because you can take this to like the adolescent level with putting kids into the sport that they're physiologically most most ready for. So
that's a fascinating topic. How do you identify what type of athlete you're handling, whether they're more like type 2 or whether they're more like type 1, whether they're like destined to be a sprinter and a power athlete, or whether they're destined to be like an endurance athlete. Because like if you take that, and there are so many famous cases, I think, in sports, when you take that kind of twitchy athlete, that fast athlete, and you kind of volume kill him into becoming type 1, and they lose their prowess of being explosive.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when kind of this.
That's what happened to me.
You lost your explosiveness.
I lost my explosiveness, and now I'm just a washed up average athlete.
You're average.
No, I hurt my back too, but no, I was never destined to be the Usain Bolt. But I think it is interesting because I do think a lot of people start with the more traditional, like high output sports for the most part. Like more people in start with.
Are you talking about like
just
at school, or
I think in terms of like endurance versus normal sports, like there's running, there's like long distance running, there's like long distance swimming and cross country. But for the most part, a lot of kids start out in more traditional sports playing, and it's more high intensity efforts with rest, sports, right? And then from there, there's like there's a point where people start to then kind of like gradually get into maybe more endurance or different types of sports. And
so what is your question?
No, and what I'm saying is like, had someone with maybe a little bit more fast twitch, if they stay in doing those types of strength exercises longer, does it give them an ability to have a higher ceiling when they then convert into this more type 1 muscle fiber type? Because you're saying it's very hard for people with type 1 to go to type 2.
Yep.
And so their ceiling, right? Like you said, you could only swim a 60-second
100 free. That was my PB. Yeah, right. I couldn't go faster.
Had you done more strength training from a younger age, had you then given yourself more of a likelihood, and then later on in your life, potentially
if I wasn't hammered with volume from the young age, maybe there was some like sprinting and speed abilities in me that were essentially converted.
But the reason
they were lost with large volume training as a 12 and 13-year-old.
Right.
That's why I believe as children, all kids should do all the sports, team sports, running,
gymnastics,
endurance, everything, because it's developing everything. Right. Like you're not thinking about it, but like when you play basketball, you're doing so much like plyometrics and jumping. It's all power training.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe that's why I'm actually so grateful for my childhood back in Poland. We did everything. Like I played soccer, I played basketball, volleyball, handball, and then I swam, I skied, I snowboarded. I did everything.
It's tricky though, because I think what we're seeing more recently is people starting
specialization.
Starting triathlon specifically. We got Sam Laidlow and who's the guy out of South Africa? What's his name?
So
the South African guy, the young kid.
Oh, Riddle,
yeah, Jamie Riddle. Like these guys started triathlon when they were 12, right?
Yeah.
And so,
but that's also what gave them their prowess.
And so you're conflicting. Like you want to do all these sports and train for everything, but then you're also seeing, okay, well, actually, some of these elite endurance athletes have specialized since they're young, and now it almost doesn't make sense to strength train. It's not like those guys are lifting heavy barbells, right?
No, but like also you have to remember that potentially they have just supreme physiology,
right?
And
that's when you throw the towel in and you stop training because you're just an age group athlete. So, what do you think?
You were a power athlete.
You think?
You were doing, like you said so, like you were into like weightlifting back before you started like running. You said you hated running.
Well, yeah, that's also just because I was never put into sports as a kid.
Yeah.
I kind of just found the weight room like in high school and like just started working out then. So who knows? Maybe if I, was swimming as a kid, I would be more of a slow twitch muscle fiber type
more
and
endurance,
more endurance type. But even now, like, I don't really think I'm that explosive when it comes to sprinting and whatnot. Like, it's very hard for me to sustain hard efforts for a longer period of time. Even if it's like 100-meter sprint, like that's very challenging for me versus just like a longer zone 2 thing. But anyways, very last thing, VO2 max. You mentioned it before.
Yep.
Cal and I went into your lab and did a VO2 max test. Was it like
last week?
It was
week
Saturday,
or 2
2
ago?
weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks ago. And this was coming off the back of our marathon. It was literally a week after a marathon.
No, it wasn't a week. I wouldn't let you do it after a week. It was 2 weeks.
Wait, really?
2 weeks after.
1 week would be too hot.
Really?
Yeah, way too hot.
Okay, anyways. Well, that just goes to show I was still struggling because, like, even 2 weeks after my marathon, it was like I just felt like my legs couldn't keep up. Obviously, I was running at a fast pace for me because I don't really do much, like, speed sessions to that intensity. But what we found was that my VO2 max was 42, which is not what my Garmin said. Which
what
hurt
did your Garmin
which
say?
hurt my feelings just a little.
What
bit.
what does your
my Garmin
say?
says 47.
Did you change your weight in the Garmin Connect app? Do you have it up to date?
I don't know.
Because Garmin once said, I went on a bike. I did like a crazy 150-kilometer bike, like with 2,000 meters of elevation. And Garmin said my VO2 max was like 73. And I went back to the Garmin Connect and my weight was like 60 kilograms.
Oh, okay.
Like back from ages ago. And I was like, okay,
I think I just got my Garmin like a couple months ago. So I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah. Up to date. But anyways,
quite a discrepancy, 42 and 47.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, side note, if you wanna boost your VO2 max on your watch, you heard it here. You go in, you put your weight at 40 kilos, and it'll say it's 80, and you can
was 60.
look like an exercise specialist.
So, anyways, from that number, we kind of decided that we could figure out what my heart rate zones were, which is quite interesting because for a lot of my training over the last even like couple of years, just from starting from not running and then to training for my first half marathon and then my second half marathon and now my full marathon that I did, I kind of knew what my heart rate zones were supposed to be according to my watch, because if you have a smartwatch or Apple Watch, Garmin, anything like that, when you go on your run, it usually tells you what heart rate zone you're in, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, sometimes you're not in pure zone 2, because for me, that would be like almost walking if I was in zone 2. But what we found by doing this VO2 max test was that my zone 2 threshold was actually up to 164 beats
So that
per
heart
minute.
rate was higher compared to what your Garmin was telling you.
Garmin and Apple Watch were telling me, which was like in the 150s, which is a significant difference, right?
Yep.
So do you think it's beneficial for everyone to get a VO2 max test
Physiological testing, absolutely.
if they are serious about their training? And obviously there's a discrepancy in the watches heart rate zones to what it actually could be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I think I can answer this question pretty well. So the way these heart rate zones or speed zones are kind of set by Garmin or Training Peaks or Pola, whatever you're using, I believe they're using your 20-minute your 20-minute maximal heart rate. So you might have done like a 5K race and they take 20-minute period where your heart rate was the highest, and they set that as the threshold heart rate. This is kind of a similar principle to the FTP test when you're doing a 20-minute time trial and you take that power output and then you multiply by 0.95 and you get your FTP, functional threshold power. And then different percentages of that power are your training zones. So similar for heart rate. I think that's how they do it. However, the drawback of this method, of these training zones that you get from Garmin, or Training Peaks, whatever, is that they're set arbitrarily. For everybody has, okay, your zone 2 is from, I actually don't know the numbers, but let's say your zone 2 is from 60% of your FTP or your 20-minute heart rate down to 40%. And this is for you, Tash, for you, Cal, and for Phil. Everybody's the same. But now, here's why the physiological testing, VO2 max test, is so beneficial, is because on the way to VO2 max, there are 2 key thresholds, as you alluded to, that happen as we increase the intensity of exercise. So the first threshold is what we call in exercise physiology a gas exchange threshold, also known as ventilatory threshold 1. If you're using lactate to measure thresholds, also that lactate threshold 1 very closely corresponds to that point during a progressive intensity exercise test.
What would that level be for the lactate level?
Oh, so usually we say that the LT1, the first lactate threshold 1, is like the first increase above 2 millimole per
2
liter.
millimoles.
Above 2 millimole per liter. Or like, for example, or if it's like the first like deviation. So for example, somebody is like 1.3 and suddenly they get 1.9. Okay, we would say that's like LT1. So that first event, that first threshold, the gas exchange threshold, is delimiting what we call in physiology 2 distinct intensity domains. Our body is achieving work in not very different, but it's achieving in a different way and these 2 different intensity domains. Below that threshold, gas exchange threshold, the intensity domain is called moderate. And what you see, if somebody is exercising at the moderate intensity, their oxygen consumption would rise. And then somewhat around 3 minutes, this is what I'm teaching in the PhysOveX labs literally right now, the undergrad students. Around 3-minute mark, you will reach what we call a steady state. Your oxygen consumption should kind of plateau. It should get flat. Similar for your heart rate. Your heart rate should kind of stabilize after like those 3-5 initial minutes of exercise at that level. Now, if you're exercising above that threshold, that gas exchange threshold, that first threshold, you're stepping into what we call in physiology a heavy intensity domain. And at that exercise intensity, our body, to match the demand, has to use more carbohydrate. And as it's using more carbohydrate, it's using up my favorite macromolecule, glycogen. And this is corresponding to progressive increase in the oxygen consumption over time. So for example, if you're exercising just above that threshold and if you exercise for, say, 60 minutes, you will see that your VO2, your oxygen consumption, but also your heart rate would just creep and creep and creep and creep. And that's causing stress to our body. That creep in the oxygen consumption, that creep in the cardiovascular stress. That's why it's so important to train in that moderate intensity domain, which, I mean, for kind of like the popular training science, that encapsulates zone 1 and zone 2. In physiology, zone 2 is that heavy one, the one that we don't want to be in our day-to-day training. Mm-hmm. So, finding out the first threshold, that will give you the true physiological, call it zone 1 and zone 2, where you want to do most of your endurance training, your like majority of your volume. Then you have that middle zone, heavy, which is also important. You don't want to be there a lot, but it's very important. Come back to the specific adaptations and imposed demands. If you're an endurance athlete, guess what? You're going to be racing at that intensity. If you're doing marathon, you're going to be quite low within that intensity spectrum. If you're doing, for example, a sprint triathlon or a 10K road race, well, 10K road race, you would go just, we're going to get to that. But for example, you're doing like an hour race, which is like a 10 miler or like a sprint triathlon, you're going to be very much further in that heavy intensity domain. Okay. And then at a certain point, as you did that progressive exercise intensity test, when you did that ramp test, there was a point when you began to breathe very heavily. You began to hyperventilate. And that's what we, at the point where that happened, we call in physiology respiratory compensation point, also known as VT2, ventilatory threshold 2, or if you were measuring lactate, LT2. That second threshold. And when people mostly talk about threshold in training, that's the threshold that they refer to.
And that lactate level
that
would be...
maximal metabolic steady state. So essentially, when you have somebody exercise just below that second threshold,
that's what we call threshold training.
That's what you call threshold training. Yeah. When you're like doing a lot of work at that
Just
high
below.
intensity,
Just
but just sustainable. Because guess what? After you cross that boundary, after you cross that threshold, if you continue to exercise at that intensity, your oxygen consumption, I love that word. They use it in the papers from the group from UK, from Loughborough. Your VO2 will rise inexorably until it reaches VO2 max, and you reach exhaustion. Kaput. End of exercise.
Kaput.
So 2 thresholds in physiology that we really look
what
after.
level is the lactate level at the second threshold?
Oh, yes. So the LT2 very often is referred to as the rise above 4 millimole per liter. So what I was going to say, in physiology, we have those 3 key intensity domains. Moderate, that's where I do bulk of my work. And you've seen it in the report that I generated for you. I color-coded these intensity domains, broken up by those physiological thresholds, and I aligned the heart rates corresponding to these thresholds. So that's why the heart rate that you got for kind of your zone 2 limit, your moderate limit, was different to your Garmin, because it's just purely based on your physiology, on your threshold. So moderate, heavy, very important for endurance racing. So I want to do some training there, but not the bulk of training. And then the final intensity domain, there is one more, but yeah, I'm not going to be getting into detail of that. The one above the second threshold is the severe intensity domain. And I guess they call it severe because if you continue to exercise at that intensity, you're going to reach exhaustion. So moderate, heavy, and severe. There is one more that's called extreme. And the extreme intensity domain is characterized by reaching of exhaustion. So you cannot complete that level of the exercise. You cannot sustain that level for the exercise. And this happens before you actually reach a VO2 max. So this is probably because the intensity is so high that the majority of the metabolism that is used for that metabolic output is anaerobic. So the fatigue mechanisms are not related to your aerobic metabolism. So moderate.
So right before fatigue, your body
your body is
super
actually
anaerobic,
you reach the exhaustion before your VO2 is coming up to the VO2 max. So that would be something like, for example, 500-meter row. Yeah.
Well, so what's interesting is Tash's zone 2 limit is 162 or
164.
164, and then her second threshold is 174. I think 174. So her zone 2 and zone 4 limit, right? That threshold limit
Quite close.
Are very close. They're within 12 beats. Her zone 3 is very small.
Narrow, yeah.
Compared to someone like Phil or I, who have like a zone 2 just under 140, correct? Is your zone 2?
My it drifts, but most of the time my gas exchange threshold heart rate is around 130, depending on modality again, guys.
Run versus
bike would be a slightly lower, run would be slightly higher. And then like my second threshold is around like 160, 158.
Right, and that's different than mine, which is closer to like 170, close to 170. But so that's like between 140 and 170 or 130.
Bigger window to work with,
Is almost like a 30 beat window compared to something like Tash has, which is a 10 or 12 beat window. Do you know anything about just that phenomena?
There might be 2 physiological reasons for it. So one could be
I'm just not as fit as you.
No, yeah, that could be one reason. So essentially,
I'm just not a good athlete.
A key kind of metric that we want to improve, especially as runners, is running economy. So how much oxygen you consume at a particular output, particular speed. So it might just happen that your running is quite inefficient, and you're consuming quite a lot VO2 at your gas exchange threshold. And guess what? Heart rate is directly related to your oxygen consumption. So if you continue to run a lot, what we see with the consistent training, your economy will improve. So your oxygen consumption at a particular speed will come down.
So we would likely see from adaptations from Tash's training, if she did more, is her zone 2 from 164 would come down.
Yeah, her limit of her zone 2 might come down. Her heart rate might come down.
That would be the most likely adaptation.
And speed might increase. Yeah. That's one explanation. Another explanation, apart from running economy, could be just simply the cardiodynamics. So just females tend to have smaller heart rates compared to males. And they have to achieve, to sustain the sufficient cardiac output, so essentially the amount of blood that's pumped into the circulation, they have to beat faster compared to male because their hearts are smaller. So it might be just that your heart rate at the gas exchange threshold is that high because your heart has to get that cardiac output by beating so much faster. And that's what I generally seen with female athletes.
That's what I've seen.
It's incredible. Female athletes, they can be like running. They say they're cruising and their heart rate is like 170, 180.
That's what happened even on my 5K. Like I was like trying to hold it below like 164. I think the average when I looked at my Strava, it was 164, but there were some times where it kind of went over. And it's just funny because like I feel like I was running like pretty slow, and when I do run faster, I feel like I can sustain a faster pace for a long period of time. For example, my marathon, like I ran that in
What was your average heart rate for the marathon?
Let me check.
Was it like 180s?
No, 170s.
170s.
I think. Let me double.
My maximal heart rate is 173. When I'm at 170, I'm in a freaking agony.
But so I think what we can all agree, based on the athletes you've coached,
that's another key
on the
point.
Athletes I've coached that are female, based on Tash's data, and that we can all agree that
everybody's different.
Everyone's different, but it's more common to see female athletes with zone 2s that are in the 150s
higher heart rates,
or 160s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's something that is very different, I guess, if you look at a lot of trained males versus females. I would say there's definitely a higher zone 2 for female athletes.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
My average heart rate for my marathon was 170. My max heart rate was 183. And obviously it just went up and down throughout the hills and stuff. And like, obviously, but
that's similar to like my max or my average was 167 on the marathon.
So guys, we covered a lot of topics today. We covered HRV, threshold, genetics, muscle fiber types, what separates pro athletes from the rest. And hopefully you guys took away something from this episode if you're still listening. Obviously this was a longer episode. But super interesting to both of us. And Phil, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your knowledge and how passionate you are about endurance and science and exercise physiology. And Phil, where can people follow you?
Where they can find me.
Where can people...
Clinical Sciences 1 Griffith University.
Phil, where can people follow your work and learn more about what you're studying?
So I guess...
what's your IG?
Yeah, my Instagram is Real Filip, Filip with an F, Real Filip 97. So yeah, it's semi-serious. I post some... like my study posters or things I do in the lab, or on Instagram story, I often kind of share what happens in the lab. That kind of allows my friends back at home and my family to kind of see what I'm doing, like on a daily basis. I find it as a nice way of communication. Apart from that, I'm not very active on any other social media platforms.
Except for Be Real.
Except for Be Real. I was going to say I do Be Real. That's why I'm Real Filip. And then, I've heard that Be Real is not a thing anymore. Yet I'm still doing it. Again, because this is just a way of me kind of like literally like the only people that follow me on Be Real is like my sister, a couple of like close friends
yeah.
and my dad. So yeah, it's just kind of for them to see what I'm doing. And most of the time it's like a photo from a lab or a photo from like a swimming pool. Like it's all the same. So yeah.
Okay. And then very last thing to leave people with, what are 2 to 3 simple training principles that you could give to someone who's chasing, long-term improvement in their fitness?
Consistency.
Not allowed to say consistency. Not allowed. We're not giving you that one, Phil.
Oh, okay,
No,
so
let
not
him. What do you
consistency.
mean? I just want people to kind of...
Okay. Yeah, fair.
Okay.
Consistency always wins. That's the number one takeaway. Consistency wins over the hero workouts, and I've learned that the hard way many times. I've actually seen just a post from Steve Magnus. He's a great author. I think it was his it was on his Instagram, but it was like a X post. Don't try to self-validate yourself in training. Trust the training that you're doing. You don't need to be doing time trials, or you don't need to be doing high rock sims. You don't need to be doing brick sessions every single weekend. Trust in the process that you're doing, in the physiology, and when it comes to the big day, that's when you unleash that beast, like all the training that you've done. You don't need don't try to self-validate in training. Just trust it. How to trust it? Monitor your physiology, how you're responding to training if you're using HRV, but also like be in tune with your own self. So with that said, if you're sensing that you're down and just something doesn't feel right, you need to make an adjustment. You need to prioritize your health at the end of the day, because we're all just doing it for fun. And that comes back to the principle of consistency. That keeps the training consistent if you're healthy in the mind and in the body. We touched on the specificity, so the training that's specific to you. And then the third one, can I have 4?
Sure.
So the third one would be, Professor Paul Larson always says, context over content. So don't try to get too bogged down in, I need to be doing this type of training and this type of training, because everybody does that. Everything is contextual. If you're doing PhD and you're stressed and your body is just not responding, guess what? This week you're not doing high intense interval training. You're just doing zone 2 cardio, and you're doing some strength training because you need to stay healthy. At the end of the day, everything is contextual. Context over the content. And then the last one, you were at the end of your episodes, you always ask for this free speed.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was thinking about the free speed, and we touched on it a little bit, believe is the free speed. Believe in what you're doing, because I really seen it in my training, in other spaces of life. You need to believe in what you're doing, that you have a purpose. You have purpose in your training, but also now kind of like going into other spaces in life, that you have purpose in, like you have a purpose. You are here on this planet, on this world, for some sort of purpose. And I believe that us meeting had a great purpose, and like I'm incredibly grateful that we've met, that you've come to my life, and I'm incredibly grateful for you having me here for this podcast. So that's kind of the four principles, and yeah, kind of a thank you.
Well, Phil, we really appreciate you coming on today's episode. You guys heard it here. Less is usually more. Specificity, context over content, and believe in yourself. That's pretty good memory. Tash knows my memory isn't very good. But those 4 things, if you guys take that with you from today's episode, you have plenty of things to take with you. So thank you, Phil, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you guys next week. Bye, guys.
See you at the High Rocks.